Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of the Structural Engineering Podcast. Today, we're joined by Matt Byrum of Hutton to talk about design build, a delivery method that changes how structural engineers engage with projects from the very start. For many engineers, design build can feel unfamiliar compared to the traditional design bid build workflows. But as Matt explains, it's a model that brings structural engineers into the conversation earlier, reshapes how decisions are made, and creates opportunities to influence costs, schedule, and performance in ways that aren't always possible in siloed processes. If you're a structural engineer curious about how design build affects your role, your responsibilities, and your ability to add value, this conversation will give you a practical insight and lessons from someone working at the forefront of integrated project delivery. Now let's get into the episode.
The Structural Engineering Podcast.
My name is Matt Byrum. I'm an architect here at Hutton. I am Vice President of Design, one of two of our Vice Presidents for our design group. I generally lead our design team in terms of the drawing production operations and standards. My counterpart, Josh, leads kind of the design and the BD side of things for our design group. First, got into appreciating design build as a delivery method. I've dealt with a lot of different project types and project delivery methods over my 27 years. And I've always loved collaboration and teamwork. And I think projects are just inherently better when everyone's on the same page and working towards the same goal. I realize that there are, a lot of people out there that have certain skill sets and talents that I don't have, people that are smarter than me. And I love being able to bring them in on the front end. And I think that kind of embodies what design build is from a collaborative approach. I kind of got into it. I was an external architect on projects with Hutton back in the early 2000s on either construction management at risk, CMAR, or design build projects. And when they floated the idea of bringing in-house design to having an integrated design build team, I kind of felt like I was a natural fit, and they did too. So that's how I ended up here. I just I work with their project managers over the years, and we work together instead of against each other like some projects do. And so, it was a natural fit to come here.
Yeah, very awesome. Well, even before that, I'm curious too. Why did you become an architect? How did you get there? What's the story?
Yeah. Well, so, like so many of us, started as a kid. I loved Legos. I loved Lincoln Logs. I loved making things. I didn't really know where that would ultimately end up or land me, but I knew I wanted something in the, building environment. And then in high school, my dad was an engineer. My dad was a avionics engineer, so airplanes and instrumentation. And I don't love math, and so I really knew kind of engineering wasn't it.
Yeah.
So just knew that I wanted to do something in the building field, and got into a drafting class in high school, and didn't really love the drawing of machine parts and some of those things that you do in high school drafting. But once we got into kind of the architectural unit and started drawing buildings, I was hooked. I've then realized that my love of buildings came through the drawing process. So I applied, got into the College of Architecture at Kansas State University back in the 1900s, as I like to tell my children.
Long time ago.
And went through architecture school, and here I am.
Dang, that's pretty cool. So what types of projects does Hutton typically pursue under design build, and where do you see it in providing the most value?
Good question. We really don't specialize in any particular project type for design build. We feel like it's really suited for almost any type of project when allowed. We have manufacturing projects, dental clinics, banks. We've gotten into doing a lot of banks recently, design build. There's just, it's not a one size, only one way approach. It can really be suitable for any owner that recognizes the value and looks for that collaboration and speed to market and all those things that it offers as an advantage. Where do we see it providing the most value? We really think it provides value in any and all project types. And especially for us, it provides that value because we're truly integrated. Our architects and our builders are in the same building for the same company. So we have, kind of one vision, one entity, one direct line of contract for our owners. So it simplifies them from contracts and invoicing. And at the end of the day, they're not stuck in the middle of a fight between their architect and their contractor who didn't draw something or who didn't price something, and they get stuck in the middle. They can go on and work on their dental practice or their physical therapy business or making widgets in whatever factory, and they can do their jobs because they're not sitting there trying to trying to referee between competing values.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you wouldn't mind, for any of our listeners are young, new in getting into this, into the AEC world, what are the different design methods or delivery methods?
Yeah.
You've mentioned a few, but what are the more common ones?
Design, bid, build is, again, has been traditionally the most common delivery method of, the last century. You draw up a set of plans, you put them out for bid. Those go out on the street. Contractor A, B, C, D provides a bid. They open them up on bid day. Lowest bid, they award it. Go build it. That contractor is just looking at a set of drawings in a snapshot of time. He hasn't been along along the process to know how decisions were made. They just know that, these lines represent these materials and they go here, and they're in charge of executing them. Also with design, bid, build, you know what the price is for those drawings, but you don't know what subcontractors or trade partners he has gotten his bids from. So you don't have any idea what plumber is going to be utilized on the project. You just know that you went with, contractor X, but you don't have any say or any idea of what plumber is in that number, what HVAC contractor is in there, what mason is in there. You just know that that's the price you're going to pay for that set of drawings. Construction management at risk then comes along, and in that relationship, your build partner is brought along somewhere in that design process. It varies. It can be as early as the early schematic design phase. It might be in design development or somewhere in there, or early construction document phase. But you bring your construction partner in, and they are part of a team, but they are still a separate entity that you're contracting with. So you contract with your architect, contract with the general contractor, but there is a dash line in between those two, if you will, of that implied relationship. Your contractor is assisting and coming on board and is providing maybe pre-construction services. They might be doing some conceptual budgeting as the drawings are being developed. They might be providing some scheduling assistance while they're being developed and helping to put some of those in so that you at least are not surprised and waiting on bid day. You might have an idea at 50% CDs that you're right on budget and everything looks great, or some things have changed and the design has now pushed us up and we may need to course correct a little bit. Design build is similar to that, except there is just one contracting line between your owner and the design build group. I've said integrated design build, I think, a couple of times, right? So design build, you can have an owner that hires a contractor, and then that contractor goes out and hires an architect under them, just like a subcontractor. But there's still one line between the owner and the design builder. For us, integrated, we are the same company, the same group of folks. We are one Hutton. And so you don't have an external architect working for a GC. So that's kind of the design build relationship. My cohort, Josh, he tries to tell the story. I mean, like the original master builders of the Renaissance, those are the original design builders, right? They didn't go hire an architect to chisel out, draw, with a quill what these drawings were. Like, they were on site. They were the builders. They were the architects, the designers. They laid their stuff block by block. They were masons. Like, those are the original design builders. And then we kind of got into this design, bid, build, and all these other delivery methods now. And of course, drawings have gotten infinitely bigger, more complex specifications. And, it's just been really kind of all evolved over time. And, things of covering your backside.
Oh yeah.
Some of the things that we have to do from a risk mitigation standpoint that has driven us into some of these other convoluted things. I mean, they used to build cathedrals with no drawings or a couple of drawing sheets, and it's just been interesting to watch that evolution.
Sure, that's changed a lot over your 26, 7 years of doing this.
Yeah. One other does a delivery method, but I've not seen it used very common around the Midwest, but integrated project delivery. That is a kind of a ultra collaborative delivery method, IPD, where not only do you have like a design builder, all of your design partners, your contractors, the owner, even down to subcontractors, all brought on board early, all kind of having skin in the game. When it comes to IPD, they all have skin in the game. And so they realize in an IPD environment, if the project wins, they share in some of those successes. So if they finish early and there's leftover dollars, then they split those back out and share in that success. If there's delays and some schedule delay or something that ends up pushing costs over, then they also share in that as well. So that one's but it's not used around here very often that I've found.
Yeah, that's an interesting delivery method for sure.
Yeah.
I can see the risk and the rewards on both of that.
Yep.
You know better than anyone. One tiny miscalculation can become a huge problem. That's why having the right business insurance matters. Next Insurance is built for structural engineers and small firms and is trusted by over 750,000 small businesses nationwide. You can get tailored professional liability and general liability coverage online in minutes. No endless phone calls or paperwork. Plans start as low as $29 a month, and if you need a certificate of insurance for a new project, you can download it instantly from your phone. Protect your practice so you can focus on building what lasts. Go to nextinsurance.com/SE podcast and get a free quote today. Okay, so from your experience, what's the biggest misconception engineers and architects, with this being the structural engineering podcast, maybe you can speak to structural engineering possible, have about design build?
There is, I think, a misconception that it is more difficult or that things change more. I think from an owner's perspective, there is this misconception that there's no accountability. We hear a lot of, it's the fox watching the hen house, and, who's keeping the architect in check if they're all working together. I think that is a misguided concept. I think most of our owners understand that when we're all working together towards their common goal, that we establish their budget, they agree to it, we're all collaborating, we're all going in the same direction to give that owner exactly what we say we're going to give them for that price. So now when it comes to the engineers around the design build piece, like I said, I think there's some ideas that, it's we don't have it all figured out yet. It's constantly changing. And there's some advantages speed-wise to some of that, but there's some disadvantages when we have to pivot, or we do rework, or we're redrawing and re-engineering or repricing something. Or I think also sometimes they feel like they don't have a voice. Like there's a difference between design-led design build and contractor-led design build in some circles. I think some engineers maybe have had a bad experience where they're being told what they're going to do, right, so they don't feel like they're being valued, as opposed to being part of the team. And that's where we like to bring them in. And again, we're not the smartest people in the room sometimes. So hey, we've got an owner. They think that they want this building and they have this budget. Can we get that with steel? Or is wood more efficient, more cost-effective for this particular project? And involving our engineers early to be able to speak to some of those things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we did a poll just to see from our audience what they were curious about or what's gone well and challenges with doing design build. And that was a consistent theme, was like, as a structural engineer, I don't feel valued when I'm in the room sometimes. But other people said they felt overvalued. They wanted our input so much and so often. It was really cool to just be part of that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask about that. Okay, so how early is a structural engineer typically brought on to a project with Hutton from a design build standpoint? And how does that timing change the outcome of your project?
Well, kind of like we were just talking about a little bit, right? Like when we recognize that value, we want our structural engineers, we want MEP engineers, we want everybody in the room as soon as possible. I mean, the more information and concepts and ideas that we can start putting together and visiting with our owners and getting an idea of budget and kind of setting that target budget, the more successful everybody is. So we try to bring our engineering partners in early so that they can help with system selections. So as we do kind of early on conceptual budgeting, conceptual scheduling, those structural systems, MEP systems, those represent a significant amount of an owner's budget that most of the time they don't see those things. You feel them, they're there. You need the structure to hold up the building to create the space.
Right.
But an owner doesn't see the value in those things, but they represent such a big portion of their budget. So to be able to get these concepts, these ideas, and figure out what's the right system and what's the right approach, and to have our engineers provide that input, or even, know if it's a tight budget, going right at the beginning of like, what's going to be our most efficient solution, and knowing that up front is very valuable. And really just then will ultimately lead to better outcomes and a more successful project. And I think engineers feeling like they have buy-in, they're just more willing to work when they do feel value, when they feel like they're providing input, as opposed to, they just need me to draw this. And so we don't want that approach.
Right. Yeah. Bring them. Everyone gets value there. Everyone feels heard and seen. And yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think we all find ourselves in rooms where we don't feel that way, or we don't see that we're being valued. And it's like, hey, are they just bringing us in just to bring us here? And but being part of the team, I think, is a big important piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so how early is a structural engineer typically brought on to a project with Hutton from a design build standpoint? And how does that timing change the outcome of your project?
Well, kind of like we were just talking about a little bit, right? Like when we recognize that value, we want our structural engineers, we want MEP engineers, we want everybody in the room as soon as possible. I mean, the more information and concepts and ideas that we can start putting together and visiting with our owners and getting an idea of budget and kind of setting that target budget, the more successful everybody is. So we try to bring our engineering partners in early so that they can help with system selections. So as we do kind of early on conceptual budgeting, conceptual scheduling, those structural systems, MEP systems, those represent a significant amount of an owner's budget that most of the time they don't see those things. You feel them, they're there. You need the structure to hold up the building to create the space.
Right.
But an owner doesn't see the value in those things, but they represent such a big portion of their budget. So to be able to get these concepts, these ideas, and figure out what's the right system and what's the right approach, and to have our engineers provide that input, or even, know if it's a tight budget, going right at the beginning of like, what's going to be our most efficient solution, and knowing that up front is very valuable. And really just then will ultimately lead to better outcomes and a more successful project. And I think engineers feeling like they have buy-in, they're just more willing to work when they do feel value, when they feel like they're providing input, as opposed to, they just need me to draw this. And so we don't want that approach.
Right. Yeah. Bring them. Everyone gets value there. Everyone feels heard and seen. And yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think we all find ourselves in rooms where we don't feel that way, or we don't see that we're being valued. And it's like, hey, are they just bringing us in just to bring us here? And but being part of the team, I think, is a big important piece.
Yeah. We had a particular project where we had an owner that wanted a certain structural system, and it might not have been the most economical. They wanted it for whatever reason, and to have that input of there is a better way to do this, that provides the information and the education, and then make a decision on, well, are we doing this because we like the look of it, or we want it because it performs a certain way. Those kind of valuable insights of you can do it this way, but here's another alternative.
Yeah. Could you walk us through the decision-making process and design build when cost, schedule, and let's say structural performance kind of is all complete or are all competing? Sorry.
Yeah. It really kind of comes down to the entire team being on the same page early and being in the room early. And if not, then at least we have kind of all the right people in the room to be able to lay that out for our owners. So when it comes to kind of that decision-making process, just making sure that the voices are there and we can then communicate that back to our owners of whatever it is, whichever solution we're trying to solve for. Kind of with that being said, though, structural systems, when it comes to cost and schedule and all that competing, they're usually, in my experience, there's less variables on what the solution is. I mean, right, you can go concrete, you can go wood, you can go steel, you might go hybrid, but by and large, and as we kind of get into some other topics here in a bit, but to me, the structural systems aren't drastically changing because they need to be what they're going to be.
Right.
Once we know how many floors we have and how much square footage we have, and what lateral systems are, and what other kind of parameters and constraints are on there, there's not, in my mind, as many variables as we have in, say, building finishes. We have 30 different ways to skin a building.
Right.
There's just not as many when it comes to structural systems. So you guys are pretty good from the get-go of we may push column grids around over and over and over and push and pull that way.
I don't know what you're talking about. No architect's ever done that.
No. And we have never undersized a mechanical room. What else have we never done?
Gosh, I like that answer.
Yeah.
So what does effective communication look like between builders, architects, structural engineers, or even just the engineering design team? I think it's something that I found through doing the podcast is almost the solution to all the problems we have in our industry and friendships and relationships is communication. So how does that work?
Yeah. I was told once you can never over communicate. I mean, there's rarely, if ever, a situation where you can communicate too much. You might get annoying, but
right.
Again, you're never going to provide too much information to the detriment of the project or whatever the solution is. I think the biggest difference in communication when it comes to design build, and for us, is again that integrated design build environment, and the fact that our design team, our builders, we're in the same company, we're in the same building for the most part. We are steps away. So when we are presented with a challenge, be it a detail or a budget challenge or a schedule challenge, I can walk 20 feet down the hall to talk to that build project manager or that pre-con estimator and come up with solutions pretty quickly. I have, again, worked in architect-only offices, and sometimes that communication of having to, even a CMAR relationship of, you email your GC or you leave them a voicemail, and a couple of days later, you might get an answer back, or even stuff like submittals, right? And you got to go from A to B and then B to C and C to D and go back through that whole process. And it takes time, and it adds to the length of the process. It can add to frustrations. It can lead to miscommunication. So the fact that we're all in the same building as an integrated group, and with that just helps all of our owners and our project teams, and I think our engineers as well. Also, when it comes to our relationships as part of the overall project, we want our engineers to be comfortable talking to our build project managers, and our project managers to be able to reach right out to the engineers. Typically the architect's involved, but again, if they need to to call you up and ask about a certain steel size member, and hey, we're having trouble getting this member. Can like we having those direct conversations because you're part of the team and not having to go through this formal chain of command because of the process and legal issues and all of that just makes everything so much more comfortable to work in that environment. And again, communication's better, speed is faster, and you just don't have to wait days and days.
So thinking through that, you guys are all in one house. You're bringing in a design team from an engineering standpoint. Are there tools, workflows, meeting formats you found especially helpful? We're formatting all this discussion to design build, but really just in general and how things are done.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a drastically different workflow approach to our design build process as a whole. There are nuances of, again, depending on what challenges we are having to address or overcome. If it's, crazy schedule, and we need to do early release bid packages and phased packages to get stuff coming out of the ground sooner, or some of those things that we've all dealt with where you break it up and you've got a site package and then a foundation superstructure package, all those to be able to get mobilized and under construction while some of the other decisions are being made. Those are kind of the specific workflows that can be benefited through a design build environment. But beyond that, most of the other communications and meetings and notes and minutes and Teams and text and emails and all of those things that we have way too much of now.
Right.
Too many modes of communication, almost where it's harder than back when you picked up a phone or, just there's the convenience of technology has also now become somewhat cumbersome. But yeah, all those kind of workflow tools and processes, I think, are the same, and maintaining, deadlines and calendar invites and all that stuff. I do think, again, this kind of goes back to the multidisciplinary teams and keeping them aligned with our owner. Again, for us, by having, less players, less directions to have to take communication because we're integrated and in-house design with our build team. I think that helps keeping information aligned.
I'm curious because we get a lot of messages about this. People in school, coming out of school, I don't feel like they were ever really told necessarily, unless they had an internship, they understood this, that their boss most of the time was truly this architect that they needed to work with. And I think often are coming out intimidated to call an architect or is there anything you can say or communicate here where you can help those people listening that you guys aren't really that scary?
Yeah, I hope that we're not intimidating. There, like all things, right? There's extremes, and there are architects out there that are very vocal and very passionate. I'm trying to not say, egocentric or any of that.
Yeah.
And they have a vision, and I think it comes down to how they approach kind of their team relationships. Again, is it a you work for me type deal, and so I'm the end all be all. And I do think that you're finding much less of that now. I think just the industry is by and large way more interested in collaboration and teamwork. And so if you're that young engineer right out of school and you gotta break the bad news that we're gonna have an X brace right here, it's just one of those things you kind of got to rip the Band-Aid off. I think just being direct and explaining this is why we have this current solution here, here, and here. And then I think, as part of that, trying to find if there's any alternatives out there that you can present. Maybe it's shear walls, and you got to look at, instead of this X brace in this particular location, we got to go to shear walls, but that may impact a couple of window placements or something that, maybe that architect then, depending on if it's a critical exterior aesthetic issue that he doesn't want the shear walls because he wants the windows, or she wants, that particular space to not have that X brace in. Just kind of working through those, but coming up with not just bringing the bad news that it can't be done, but maybe an alternative solution. And on the flip side of that, just with my train of thought of, I've had some structural engineers in the past that I have proposed something and their immediate response is, no way, can't be done. And then you give them a day to think about it, 2 days to think about it. And then they come back and they're like, well, actually, I think we can do something like that. I think we can, move this beam or look at it differently. And it just takes a little bit of processing time. And so it is just all part of the profession and learning and kind of going through those steps. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. I tell my younger design team members, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't understand or, don't be afraid. Like, most people are not going to judge you harshly when you're naturally inquisitive and trying to learn.
Right. Yeah, I was told early in my career that a structural engineer is the architect's engineer. That is truly who, we really interface with. We make sure that what they want to do is safe. And so with that, like, interactions a week, like, is there a number, if you're getting called daily at the beginning or a couple of times a week, like, I think now in this day and age, it seems that people are worried about reaching out too much or over communicating, as you mentioned. Like, is there, what's a relative amount of discussion that you find yourself in with a structural engineer?
I don't know that there is a just set rule of thumb on cadence. I mean, it totally varies. But
are you worried if they're not calling you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If there is no discussions being had and no talk about, like, again, what we're doing for column sizes and bay spacings and lateral and X bracing locations, and, like, if there's not back and forth, especially in the early stages, schematic design and design development. For your younger engineers that might be listening, if you don't, know the phases of a typical project, where we have kind of pre-design and early conceptual into schematic design, and then design development is really where the meat of the decisions are to be made. We should have a structural grid locked down by design development.
Right.
You guys need to start, confirming loads and member sizes and everything. And what I try to teach my team as well is, like, we do the initial development schematic, we refine and add to those decisions in design development and get to know 95% of what's going into this building. And then your construction document phases are then taking that design development information and making the drawings buildable with those decisions made. And again, we've never moved a column or done anything in CDs or none of that.
Even during construction, definitely.
Yeah, never. And, tried to push a obnoxious cantilever out that can't ever be done. That's never happened. Also, never tried to have a 4-inch thin blade of a roof member just out there that looks really good in a rendering. That's never happened.
Mm-hmm.
So the complexity of the project will dictate that cadence. And I would say, again, early on, there's going to be a lot more back and forth between architect and structural engineer, kind of establishing the building form, getting that structural system in that grid. And again, then it depends in a design build scenario, especially with our teams, our build project managers and our pre-con guys or gals are going to be looking at already doing cost models and starting to develop and refine those budgets and estimates. The more information that is on paper, the more accurate budgets are going to be and estimates are going to be. And so as those continue to evolve and get more information, then the price will then reflect what's actually happening in those drawings as well.
So with that, having design and build all in one house, how do you handle disagreements on approaches or materials, when maybe the whole team hasn't completely got on the same page and the priorities might be a little different?
Oh, we've never had that ever. I'm kidding. That's sarcasm if you can't pick that up. Again, for us in this model of this integrated design build, we've got build people in the room sometimes at the very first owner meeting where we don't even know yet exactly what the program is. And an owner might be meeting with us. They might have told us that they want a factory to make widgets. And they think that they need to have, X amount of space and need to accommodate 20 offices, and they've got 15 pieces of equipment out there. So we may have a general idea, but then as we sit down with them and then we start to find out that, oh, well, in addition to those 20 offices, they have a whole nother research and development or some other function that needs this office space, or they need not only the manufacturing space, but they need warehousing space to store those widgets.
Yeah.
And maybe that wasn't initially sized appropriately. So as we're having those conversations with our owner and then designing a building around that, our build teammates are with us along that same process, and they're starting to hear like what that owner's real desires, wishes, goals, and dreams are around this building. So they are at least aware of, oh, this owner is really, really, puts a lot of importance on efficiency for his, factory floor. And so they don't want to have, equipment spaced too far apart, something along those lines, right? I'm making stuff up, but the build teams, our build teammates, then realize and understand like what those key drivers are for that owner, and they're keeping those in the back of their mind too, as they know our drawings are developing. And oh, I heard your owner say they were a big art lover and they wanted to have some space for art in this building, and we don't know what that is yet, but we went ahead and put X amount of dollars in the budget, knowing that we were going to do something around this art piece. And as that develops, now you can start to say, oh, okay, well, we had $20,000 in there for this element. But now that it's kind of designed out, okay, it's really coming in at like 15,000. So those kind of things, tends to limit some of those competing values. There is always going to be a tiny bit of tension, no matter what in this industry, between design and aesthetics and then budget and schedule. But when we understand our budget and schedule from our build teammates and they understand our design, aesthetic, those pieces, there is a lot more empathy and understanding and working together than, I don't know why this architect drew this. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And, they don't care about protecting it because they don't know the blood, sweat, and tears or the passion of the owner or whatever that was that drove to that decision. And I will also say, kind of again, from a Hutton perspective, so our core values that we have here at Hutton is lead, inspire, respect, and construct. And we really try to live those out in everything that we do. We lead our team through communication of all the options, of all the costs, and try to lead our owners in finding the best solution, respecting each other to have those discussions and sometimes honestly hard conversations, and then to be able to compromise or work together when needed, inspiring each other to develop the best possible solution with our owners and their budget. And that includes, again, our engineering partners, our structural, MEP, civil, all of those engineering partners. And then finally, we look at the construct value and, constructing the best possible product for our owners, both in the drawings and in the actual building. So I think when we keep those things in mind, no matter what team or even delivery method you're on, when you kind of keep those core concepts in mind, it helps to reduce some of those tensions and competing values.
So we talked about it a little bit, but how has design build influenced structural systems that you tend to select steel versus concrete versus hybrid? Is there anything else there that you want to talk about?
Again, I think bringing our structural engineer partners in early to kind of talk about some of these things. If we've got an owner that maybe aesthetics, they put a more value on aesthetics than lowest cost.
Right.
Maybe that will allow us to start having a discussion of, cast in place concrete structural system, and we're going to expose it and have some beautiful concrete features. Or, hey, this owner has a really tight budget. We need to give them the most we can get, and steel's the most efficient solution. So having our structural engineering partners early on help to inform some of those decisions to the whole team. And kind of also when we get into kind of a design build situation up front where our build partners and pre-con and estimators can understand supply chain issues and be able to pivot from one system to another because materials aren't available. You don't know if is it going to be supply chain or forecasted economic trends on a certain material price. Is concrete now cost prohibitive?
Right.
And we have to look at some other solution. The other thing that helps at least our pre-con and build team in conjunction with the structural systems or MEP systems is knowing the available market and the labor available. And maybe there's a whole lot going on in a particular community. So there's not a lot of concrete guys out there able to perform some of the concrete structural work. So some of those factors too, we can have those conversations early to the benefit of our owners to help guide those systems.
That's the next question. I feel like I kind of know the answer because the building we're sitting in right now is this beautiful mass timber building. In your experience, does design build encourage innovation in the structural design?
Absolutely. I guess I should reframe that. Does it encourage more innovation or is it cost driven to limit it? It's probably both in some regard. But I do think in general, especially in the design build environment, it does encourage more creativity because we know the budget up front. We have some of those guardrails in place. It's real easy if you have no budget to just design something and not care, because I don't know if anybody's really ever had a blank check when it comes to a project. I haven't yet, but
Soon.
Soon, hopefully someday. But I think anytime you have guardrails around something, it absolutely pushes the boundaries and makes you look for better ways to be innovative and be creative. When you don't have some of those constraints, we tend to go into default mode, and you're like, well, we've done this before, so there's less thought, there's less creativity, and ultimately less innovation. When you don't have some of these defining parameters or guardrails on it. I kind of always go back to the old quote, necessity is the mother of invention or innovation in this case, right? And, really those needs and ways to get creative are driven through that, those guardrails that drive it. So.
Right. And I was thinking about that is that, if you do a hard bid project, you're to some point, or there's some check-ins probably during that project to make sure you're somewhat in line with the client's budget. Hopefully you're not going to bid and it's absolutely wild, but that's where VE comes in probably at that point. But right, the pain right there.
Uh-huh. And it depends. In a hard bid situation, you're typically relying on your design team's historical knowledge. So if you've got a bank and the last bank they did was 3 years ago, and they're looking at, okay, we did this bank and it was X amount of dollars per square foot. So we think we can do this one, adjust for inflation, yada yada. Like we think we can do this bank for this,
right?
And I'm probably going to tick off a lot of other architects, but we are not good cost estimators. We rely on historical data. We don't have a good pulse on, again, what's the price of concrete doing? Within our group, we have these build teammates that are looking at, construction economists that are forecasting what the price of steel is going to do based on world market factors. And I just think, again, architects are good at coming up with great design solutions and beautiful buildings and functional problem-solving spaces. We are not great at telling an owner with real confidence what a building is going to cost. So yeah, you end up with a lot of holding your breath on bid day when it comes to a design bid build arrangement. And it can be scary. And then you get frustrated owners because it came in so high, and you said those dreaded 2 letters a little bit ago, which then sends your design team back to the drawing board, puts a lot of extra pressure and added work on all members of the team. Structural has to go back potentially and redo. Are you lopping off whole parts of the building and you got rework there? There's just so many factors and that all then creates time, and you have to go back and redraw and then rebid, and it totally protracts the project timeline. And design build, you have the luxury of, again, having those costs check-ins, having a true general contractor and pre-con team and build project manager going along as the drawings are being developed to say, yep, we're still in, we're good. Oh, we're starting to veer off. We're, kind of maybe 5% out of your comfort zone, Mr. Owner, Mrs. Owner. What do you want to do here? And I mean, do we want to look at, cutting back on square footage, or do we want to look at changing some finishes, or maybe not finishing out everything and just shelling an area? So being able to guide them through some of those options without having to totally go back and redo everything.
I'm pretty interested that you don't keep track of steel economic forecasting on a daily basis.
I do not. I also don't look at the price of coffee every day, but I probably should. But yeah, no, we like I said early on, we each have talents and we each have things we're good at, and I feel like as a general rule, there are way better people looking at costs and budgets, and again, we have the ability then for our build teammates and to walk down the hall and say, hey, I got this idea for this design of this space. And maybe there's a specialty element that the owner and us kind of dreamed up together, and okay, what do you think this might do to the budget? Or, what if we tweaked it slightly? And for them to say, oh yeah, if we did this, and this, we could build it faster, stronger, better, cheaper. Yeah.
Right. One thing I didn't think about asking, but now it's kind of come to me, is the relationship between the design build team and the owner has got to be really strong. Like, that's something you've got to maybe not work on, but like it's probably more of a relationship than normal. You're coming back with forecasting of the elements and discussing money and changes, and it's more real. It's more real time, more so.
Yeah. Again, I think it's just having that additional voice in the room to provide that owner budget certainty and comfort, and none of us want to go through Target and load up a cart and then get to the checkout and then go, oh, well, that's $200 more than I was expecting.
Right.
There's no prices on this stuff. I know last time I bought coffee, it was $5. Well, now it's $8. Yeah. And those things compound into, like, to walk up and have no idea really where you sit versus, here's exactly what it's costing. And here we just priced up this whole cart and it's right where we thought it was. Or, oh, well, we've had some market changes and,
we need to put a few things back on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess I won't be, having, this package of Oreos tonight.
So how often are you guys communicating with the owner? Like, I think as an engineer, I have no clue. What does that frequency look like on a average project?
Again, it varies, but so our design team, we call it a roadmap. I mean, it's a basic schedule, but we give our owners a roadmap early on where they can kind of expect not only the deliverable deadlines of the milestones of SD, DD, CDs, and then when construction is, planned to begin. We also then try to, in some regard, it kind of depends on the complexity, but outline like, okay, we're going to have these certain meetings and we're going to go over these items. So, in design development, you can expect that we're going to sit down and we're going to present to you all the light fixtures in the building and all the plumbing fixtures in the building, so you know what you're getting. And we're going to go room by room and look at the hardware on the doors, so that you know that this closet doesn't have a lock on it, and the bathroom, of course, has a normal lock set.
Right.
Those kind of things. When it comes to structural engineers, again, like talking through and bringing an owner in early to say, hey, if you don't have a certain system in mind or an aesthetic that you want, again, we think this is the most economical, cost-effective solution. We think it's steel. And so you're going to have, typical steel building, and, your building is so large, square footage wise, that we have to break it up. We're going to have some expansion joints in here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can expect, that you're going to have these expansion joints where your building can move freely and independently, and kind of guiding them on some of those concepts of what they can expect from a structural system standpoint. Again, trying to think of other examples, but even conversations down to, hey, we think, your budget, this really needs to be a wood frame building. As much as we try, wood naturally cups, twists, warps. So, hallways and such might have just ever so much variation from wood framing versus metal stud. Being able to kind of have those conversations with them.
Can you give an example of a project where early structural input significantly changed the design direction or saved time and money?
I can. I don't know about saving time and money. My initial thought on this, when I was kind of reflecting back on it, I can think of a specific project where time was absolutely critical to our owner. They had a very demanding schedule, and they had to be in a building by a certain date. We had initially gone down the road of a structural steel building was the right system for this, based on size, based on efficiency, cost. And this was all right after COVID. And if we all remember the fun times of a post-COVID world.
Oh, yeah.
The structural steel itself wasn't so much an issue, but as we started going through a very fast-paced design with our structural engineering partners, our build team, us in the design team, we quickly realized, and we're getting input from our build team, the structural steel wasn't an issue, but bar joists and metal deck were becoming increasingly hard to get. And really, if we had gone down that road, we would not be able to hit this owner's schedule.
Right, I think Amazon was buying up the whole market at that time.
There was rumors and reports that, yes, they were doing an insane of warehouse square footage, and they were buying up or locking up the fabrication mills, right, to where bar deck or bar joists and metal deck just weren't going to meet this schedule. And so we then got with our structural engineering partners and had to give them the bad news that we were going to pivot on structural systems, and we went to wood. Building was sized appropriately that we could go to wood. And again, if you remember those post-COVID days, wood was not a cheap material.
Oh, no.
And it actually cost them a little bit of a premium, not to mention the rework that we all had to do to change from steel and metal stud to wood and wood frame. But having everybody in the room together in a design build scenario with our engineering partners, with our build teammates, we were able to tell that owner that, look, it's going to cost a little bit more, but we can get wood. Right now, the prices are outrageous, but this will meet your schedule. And they collectively decided that, yes, that's the route we need to go because, again, the critical driver in all of this was to be open by a certain date and start generating revenue. So it offset what the bar joist and deck would have ultimately delayed.
Yeah. What are the biggest structural engineering risks in design build delivery, and how do you mitigate them early?
So in my experience, I think it has been on projects with crazy schedules and kind of early release packages and not knowing all the final design solutions. Those are usually risks, I think, when it comes to design build, especially in very fast-paced projects. Sometimes we're having to lock down a column grid and foundation systems to get an early release package out when we don't even have all of the insides of the building figured out. So we're gonna have a pretty regular grid. It's going to be evenly spaced so that we can get a steel package going. We can get concrete in the ground, all that, which we have to get dirt work and site and utilities even ahead of it.
Right.
And so to come back and, to try and make changes later, that's risky. It can slow down the process. It adds cost. I know of another project where, again, not all of the above ground stuff had been finalized, but they had to get footings and foundations and such in the ground. So you end up sometimes spending more money. Maybe your foundations are upsized to the worst case scenario or the most anticipated load to where you may end up buying a little bit more concrete and spending money there and things when speed is. You may pay a little bit of a premium on some of these things or sacrifice functionality or flexibility because you had to get your columns locked down and get your structural steel erected while we're still at exactly how the spaces are going to lay out inside this building.
Yeah, depth VEing, as we already sighed heavily, in a way that protects performance and safety while meeting the budget.
Yeah, the dreaded VE. I think we can all agree that we hate that term. Honestly, it's semantics, but we kind of try to reframe that when we have to have conversation with owners that it's not engineering because they all know it means they're going to lose and have to cut things and sacrifice things. We try to frame it in terms of value education. So VE being maybe not quite it as, educating your clients on the value. And going back to this idea and giving our owners the most valuable information for them to make informed decisions and to talk them through what the cost of material X is, or hey, if we again shell out maybe a fourth floor, it'll save X amount of dollars that you can go back and build later. Now I always have to run cheaper than today if you didn't do it before, just the nature of the beast, right? So, but they don't always, they don't have unlimited funds, and it may have to be a decision that they can make, but all we can do is give them the most information, the most reliable information for them to make educated decisions. So we try to do that through, what I hope is more value education than value. To get the big cuts out of a budget, it really means typically cutting square footage. And when you cut square footage, rarely are you ever getting it back. Again, it's going to be expensive later to come back and mobilize and do another phase.
Right.
And so there's just a lot of decisions. But, if you just change carpet from a $3 signed carpet down to a $2 signed carpet, they're not big, impactful swings at those things. Structurally, again, in my experience, I see the least impact to VE usually because, again, it's maybe you don't have anybody that's along the whole step of the way to tell you that you're going off the rails. And so you can't start cutting big chunks of the structure out. It's the bones holding up building. It's the thing that makes it possible for them to have these functions in this building there. So you usually don't see, in my experience, as much of a hit to structural system, changing the mechanical systems from a very expensive 4-pipe system with lots of control to package rooftops that, split systems with no humidity control, those kind of things.
Right. I've experienced that myself. Like that VE phase, and they're like, okay, structural, how do you save money? And you go, well, the structure is pretty much the structure. Where you can save money is where that architect took the structure down to 4 inches on this cantilever. That's really expensive. We could talk about that. But again, that's not the structure. It's the design decisions. But it's funny you bring up the mechanical engineer, because I was just talking to one the other day about VEing place we get to, because we want to provide, the do it in system and human comfort. What a challenge to handle that on the mechanical side.
Yeah.
And he's like, we get into VE and we start making bad. We change the systems to where they're not the best. They're not going to perform the way. And I said, that's really interesting. And he asked me the same, like, what do you guys find in that? And I go, well, we don't go, well, we cut all the beams in half, right? That's not how we can do things. But the system could be cut in half and still meet code, but not for a mechanical the structure.
Right. Yeah. I think of a specific VE scenario where, we had initially talked about the potential for a future floor on a building. If it was to have a vertical expansion, well, we would need to upsize the foundations now to be able to accommodate a future vertical expansion. And so one of the VE things there was, well, we just won't do that vertical expansion. So now we can shrink the footings back down. That one was done early enough, hypothetically, of course, early enough that, the foundation systems were, downsized and no thought given to a future floor.
Yeah. What was most surprising to you going from being just on the design side to now working with a contractor? What was something that you came in and you're like, you guys do that? You guys think that way? Like misconceptions you had?
About kind of our build partners.
Just construction in general. Now that you're so much more integrated per se with the build side than before in your career.
I think part of the reason I'm here is it's just always been a collaborative approach. I have been so pleasantly surprised when some of our field guys, we had a that was building it exactly like it was drawn on a Hutton project. And again, we have one of our core values is respect. And like, he felt comfortable enough to call our design teammate, say, I'm putting up this soffit material. I don't know that this is what maybe you had in mind. Can you at least come out and look at it? And we came out there and looked at it, and he was right. It was like, this is not what we had envisioned. It just wasn't giving us the desired outcome and look that we had thought we were going to get. And I really, really valued him saying, I could just put it all up and say, well, that's the way it was on the drawings. And that's what you get in like a design bid build scenario, right? Yeah. And like, we're happy to change it, but, we're going to charge you to tear it down, and then you're going to pay extra, and we're going to replace it and change order. And this build teammate just, at least said, maybe I should just ask him if this is really right. And, it gave us the opportunity to go back to the owner and talk to him and course correct, and as a unified team say, yeah, let's go a different direction.
How does the design build model change client expectations regarding cost certainty?
Yeah, I think design build definitely provides a speed advantage. There's industry, DBIA, Design Build Institute of America. There's research. There is proven advantages to speed doing a design build delivery, especially when utilized to its full potential. We talked about ability to do those early release packages, issue those drawings, have your contractor on board, be part of the process, get out of the ground faster while other decisions are still. That just speaks to that speed advantage. And really, the key is to communicate the advantages and limitations with our owners. I think they really appreciate the cost certainty when you have, again, that estimating group doing multiple budget check-ins and updates throughout the course of the drawing development. They know what they're going to get. And going back to not taking that shopping cart up and knowing how much the whole cart is, that really, I think, helps to manage that client's expectations. And, hey, you told me at 50% it was going to be $2 million. At 100%, it's 2.1 million, or it was 1.9. I mean, there's just them knowing that you're within a couple of percentage points is pretty valuable.
How does Hutton structure its design build teams or collaboration instead of siloed decision making?
Yeah, like we've talked about, we really are truly integrated here, from our design team, creating design solutions, our pre-construction team, developing those early budgets and schedules, our build team executing those visions, um, our facility services team taking care of the building after the owner moves in, and still having that continuity. Kind of one of my examples of collaboration as part of the overall team itself is when we were doing a corporate headquarters for one of our clients, and they had a really detailed, intricate, beautiful boardroom with lots of wood and running trim, and they just wanted this boardroom to be nice and again beautiful and kind of convey their brand and their message. And our interiors team was looking at all kinds of wood details and stuff, and they reached out to a couple of our finish carpenters that were out in the field, right, that installed, and asked them to come in. So these two carpenters came in and sat down with our interiors lead as she described the vision and what she was wanting to achieve and what the design intent was. And they gave her feedback, and together collectively provided the information for how they would build it so that we could draw it and it would actually get built, and how they would. So I think that is an absolute invaluable resource and benefit to our owners to have that kind of knowledge, because in a lot of instances, an architect may draw a detail and say, Mr. Contractor, you're going to build it just like I draw it. That may not be the best way. It may not be the most efficient. It may not structurally hold up. Who knows? And utilizing the talents that we have, we were able to draw it right the first time, get it built that way, and the owner loved every bit of it.
Always thought it'd be interesting to be able to have that level of conversation with all the structural subs on a project. Hey, how do you guys want to tie the rebar? What do you think the foundations could look like? Walk me through your formwork. What?
Absolutely.
How does this work? How do you guys want to build this the most efficiently? Like, how awesome to be part of it at that level.
We're talking to a steel erector that's, having to swing steel 7 stories up, and like, hey, is there, be it member sizing or connections or, what does this look like? Kind of unrelated, but related. I think about, there's this huge tension between an automotive engineer and a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that in our industry. And, there's kind of this joke, I guess, if you will, that, a lot of mechanics want to punch the engineers in the face, right? Because like, hey, this particular model, you have to take the wheel off. How ignorant, and like, what engineer? And they're like, well, it worked on paper. Like, no, but that to install that or work on it, there's not space to get your knuckles in there to even remove a bolt. I mean, like, there is insane value from people that have to build and construct and erect and do all of those things that engineers can also learn from. So there's another tidbit for your young engineers. Like, talk to the guys that have to do this stuff. Go out to a concrete pour, them place concrete, not pour concrete, place concrete.
And then watch it dry.
Yeah. And then just sit there and watch it dry. And then watch them, zip around on their little power trollers. That's always fun to watch them do that. No, but like, seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak, right. You can learn so much. Piggybacking on that too, like I tell anybody that will listen, going into architecture school, I think every single architect should have to have some kind of construction experience before they get their degree in architecture. Whether or not you're just on a residential framing crew pushing a broom, but you're on site, you're seeing how walls are being hammered together and stood up, and how the roof trusses or the floor joists interact and meet that wall, and how they're running the floor decking and, bridging and all that kind of stuff. And I think structural engineers could also benefit from, either being in the field, watching some of that stuff go into place, whether it's erected or, again, concrete being poured, or working in a steel fabrication shop
Oh yeah.
and seeing how some of those pieces are detailed out and then fabricated. Like, to me, those are invaluable when it comes time to draw them. Gives you kind of a thought of, man, am I doing this maybe the best way that I could?
Yeah, something Max and I have suggested a lot to our listeners is like, if you're in school, you need an internship, and let's just say for some reason you're having a challenge finding a structural internship, just go work for a trade. I think most firms, if not all of them, will go, wow, you flew steel for a summer, you placed concrete,
Yep.
even if it's residential concrete and you're pouring driveways and sidewalks, right? Like,
Yeah.
knowing
Dragging
how things
them
go
along.
together. I'm sure you find it too on the architectural side. Like,
Yep.
it's really hard for people to understand how buildings go together, right? You can, on the engineering side, we can design a beam and a column and come out of school with that. But
Right.
how does everything interact?
Yep.
And if they're in the field is the answer.
I had drawn parapet cap details early in my career, and I had drawn a lot of them, and I knew, I knew how to draw them, but I didn't fully realize what all of those lines meant on one simple detail at the top of the wall until I actually went out on site and I saw the process of how all of those pieces came together to snap a cap on top of a brick wall, and all the components and things in there. And then, it finally, clicked of all those lines that I was drawing, and this is what it looks like in real life.
So what qualities do you think engineers need to thrive in a design build model in a traditional design bid build workflow?
I think the biggest piece of advice here, no matter if you're early in career or seasoned, but when you come into design build, I think you absolutely need to be open to alternative ideas. In a design bid build sense, for the most part, like you said, you work for the architect, but you're basically engineering, drawing it, and out the door it goes, right? But in design bid build, again, you have other voices, you have other ideas, you have other trade partners involved, even when you're designing. So be open to ideas. They may challenge a design solution, and it may, your solution may still be the best approach, but at least be willing to listen and find out, oh man, this guy's got a great idea. Again, maybe this soffit detail isn't what we thought it was. Just being willing to listen to, and they're not questioning you because they think you're incompetent or any of that. It's not, you don't know what you're doing. It's like, well, hey, have you entertained this idea? We constantly go into default mode because we're pressed for time, and we know this is one way to do it. And for somebody to come back and go, well, what if we did this? Just be open to it from a structural or any other engineering perspective.
Yeah. Where do you see design build heading in the next 5-10 years, let's say, especially in Kansas and the Midwest?
Like all things here in the Midwest, the things tend to start East Coast, West Coast, and they take some amount of time to filter in. And we're no different here in design build. There is not a lot of design build currently in this market. And we wanted to be on the front end of that. I do think it's going to continue to grow. We are seeing more clients learn more about it or ask for it. Municipalities and such are still slower to adopt, again, because they have public interest or public dollars in mind, and they think that a design bid build solution is serving them best. I still disagree with that in a lot of ways. But I think it will continue to grow here. I think clients, again, will continue to seek out options that provide them speed to market, which design build definitely affords them. And again, that cost certainty that we talked about. When you bring your contractor, or especially your integrated design build team, along with you from the get-go, you're going to just have that much better comfort in the numbers that you're going to ultimately spend. For most of our clients, this is the biggest investment they will ever make. This a building is going to be, especially the commercial building is going to be the most money that they are ever going to spend. So guiding them and leading them through that process with that information and with that cost certainty, I'm hoping we'll continue to keep the traction behind design build.
What do you think the current ratio is? Like, how much of what's being built is design build in the regions you're experienced with?
I don't honestly know statistics wise. If I had to guess, 20%, but I would rather look that up and get it for you.
Okay. Do you think it'll become the delivery, the most common delivery, let's say default delivery method for most mid-scale, let's say commercial projects as we move into the future?
I would like to think so, and I'm obviously biased towards this delivery method because I do think it's the best. But I mean, the reality is change takes time, and it doesn't just pivot very often. Again, there's still a lot of owners out there that their key driver is lowest cost, and it's hard to overcome that when that's their key driver is the least amount. And so what they are putting value on is the lowest cost, not value in relationship, not value in, providing information or cost certainty or some of that. I've had more than one owner that they decided to not go design build and went design bid build, or had gone with somebody else. And we had given them some conceptual numbers, and I have had more than one owner come back and go, we didn't go with you. And, at the end of the day, after we went through all this other stuff and after all the change orders and after all the other stuff, we ended up spending pretty much what you told us it was going to be. So I think, as those kind of play out, maybe that will start to turn a little bit to where they might realize if they do another that they might get more value and more bang for their buck in having this collaborative integrated process than thinking that it's going to be the cheapest and then change order after change order, or, my architect, they didn't listen, they didn't draw this, and so my contractor didn't price it, or just all of those things.
Relative to time in your career, when do you think design builds really started ramping up? When did that? Do you know when it was even invented or kind of came out as a process?
Well, again, go back to the original master builder concept. It's been in the industry
forever, almost.
Since somebody took two sticks and made a roof and a shelter.
At the start of your career, were you hearing people say design build? Was that becoming?
I was aware and educated on design build as a delivery method, even in the old days,
in the old 1800s,
in 1900s. There, 1900s. I was aware of it, and you still see it a lot. I mean, federal government projects utilize it. A lot of horizontal and heavy contracting. So bridges, roads, water treatment plants, a lot of those things. There's still a lot of people that believe in the design build delivery method. I don't know exactly why, but the vertical has been slower to adopt it than the horizontal. Kind of, again, heavy roads and those type of projects. So I don't know what that percentage was back then versus what it is now. But again, I do think it's getting more traction. I mean, we know firms in St. Louis and Dallas and Denver, and that's all they do. And again, it's slowly making its way in. And the more that, again, owners experience the advantages to it, and that they have a much better experience, then it will slowly continue to gain traction.
Now, wrapping up here, what would you say is one lesson you wish every engineer understood before stepping into their first design build project?
Kind of piggybacking on what we talked a little bit before, being flexible and adaptable. Not only listening to other ideas, but also, again, some of these projects move very quick, and we have had to have some conversations with some engineering partners about making sure that we had this delicate balance of we need you to provide information so that we can keep pricing going and develop it, but not getting too far ahead so that when something changes, you're going back and doing rework, right?
Right.
So this constant dance of what's the right amount of information without doing too much and then getting frustrated because all this stuff keeps changing. And again, it's never happened, I don't think, once ever in the history of time that an architect has, changed the plan on you. We get our grid, we lock it in, we're good, and we're on down the road, right? Isn't that the way it always works?
Absolutely.
No, so in all serious though, just knowing that there just some flexibility, adaptability. I mean, we can do a lot with narratives and blue beam concepts and some general, framing stuff without having to get full on down the road into Revit.
Right.
Same thing with, in MEP and some of those other disciplines of, hey, we're still trying to get this floor plan frozen and don't go drawing all the duct work and all the terminals and all that stuff. So just knowing that some of those things are going to happen, and because we can go faster and sometimes do, then keeping your foot hovering over the gas, but not.
Right. Communication.
Yes. Very good.
So my final question for you is, what do you wish every new structural engineer knew?
Things are always going to change. It's just the nature of the creative, iterative process. Unless you just have a shoebox of a building and you're getting a 40 by 80 pre-engineered structure, and you don't care what goes inside of it. I mean, things are going to change. We're going to need you to move that column over, and it's, we need to look at this X bracing's in the way, or it's just the nature of, remembering that this is a process, and to not get frustrated because you have to go back because, this architect just updated the model and, now you got to go back and rework everything and then rerun all your loads and everything else.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the Structural Engineering Podcast. I think I heard a lot about flexibility, communication, and a lot of knowledge about design build. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.